Welcome to the Honest Reflection Podcast with your hosts, Cody Hairston and Nick Woods. Here, we want to help you reflect on your week and be honest about your relationship with God. We hope you enjoy this episode. Hey guys, glad to have you in our conversation again this week. And Nick is here with us as per usual. How's it going, Nick?
Good to be with you again. It's always a joy to be able to sit down and reflect on some things, especially as we've been going through these aspects of the fruit of the Spirit. And I hope everyone else is finding some joy in this as well as we think about our lives in relationship to our walk with the Spirit. We're going to continue to discuss those things today. And as we continue to reflect on the fruit of the Spirit, we're looking specifically at faithfulness right now. And so we're going to continue to do that for one more episode. And then, Lord willing, next episode, we will transition to discuss and reflect on what Spirit-led gentleness looks like in our lives. And so that's what you have to look forward to. But today we're going to continue to think about faithfulness specifically in our family relationships. And as always, as we've said before, we understand family means different things to those listening. And we understand, that families look differently. But I think we're hopeful that what we say will help each of us reflect on how our lives impact those we are often closest with in proximity and relationally. As we think about how this can impact our walk with Christ. As we reflect on the topic today, I think we just, again, ask ourselves the question, can my family depend on me? Am I a dependable person? I think we've talked about that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. When we're thinking about bearing the fruit, I think it implies that your life displays visible characteristics that prove you're walking with the Spirit. And specifically with faithfulness, we've tied that to dependability. We're called to be faithful, and we've discussed how that needs to be seen by others in these different episodes that we've looked at, and even in the closest and sometimes most challenging relationships in our lives. We need to live faithfully to them. They need to be able to depend on us. So we're gonna dive into that a little bit more. It involves people often who most likely know you the most and know you the best. And so, as we've said before, when we talk about our families in this series, that can breed some challenges, that can breed some things that are kind of difficult to work through. But I think the concept that comes to mind as we start this, when we're thinking about reliability, is when Jesus was talking about oaths and vows, and he said, just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And so the question that came to my mind is, do our actions and our words prove to be reliable in that way? So Cody, why don't you get us started with our reflection?
Yeah, we've been really trying to kind of narrow this down and simplify things. And so when I like one of the last words you used there, reliable, right? Are we proven to be reliable? And so the way I kind of think about it is, are we there for our families? Right? That's what I think of when I think about reliability. Are you there? We need to be there for our families. I think everybody has a friend who they know will be there for them in a pinch. I can think of several people actually that fit that mindset, that if something happens, I know they're going to be there, or if they say they're going to do something, I already know. It's almost like it's as good as done as soon as they say it, right? And so I just assume that they're going to carry through because they are faithful. And I think that needs to be the way that our family thinks about us. They need to know that we're going to be there for them. They need to be able to trust that, hey, when they say they're going to do this, it's as good as done. And they know that we're going to be there for them, and they know that whatever we need to do for them, we're going to do those things. That's what faithfulness in the family looks like. And I think one thing to think about as far as being there for our families is that if we're going to be there for our families, that includes actually being there for our families, like being in the same proximity as them, literally physically being with them. In the days of modern technology, I think the value of being with our family can kind of be lost on us, right? Because we can FaceTime people, or you can Zoom, right? We can even going all the way back to when we used to call people, right? You can call people on the phone, right? Because all these updates in technology, we don't always have to be in the same physical location, and so sometimes we forget how important that is. But when we're thinking about families, your spouse needs your physical presence, right? Definitely not 24/7, but your spouse needs you to be around them. You need them to be around you too. That's something that needs to happen, right? Your kids, they need to see you. They need to be around you. They need to interact with you. In fact, I think that's often where they get to see your faithfulness, right? So we have to spend time with our families. That way they get to know who we are, right? They get to see our faithfulness on display, and then they just kind of learn to trust us as things go on. Now, of course, sometimes we enter into seasons where that's harder than it is maybe in other times in life. You know, you may have just taken on a job that maybe it requires you working overnight or travel time, or you started school, something like that, right? You can go through seasons of life where it is harder to be around your family, but I think our faithfulness will kick in when we're in those moments, and we'll say, well, what can I do about this? Sure, I can't be around my family maybe as much as I feel like I need to, but hey, what are some things that I can do to remedy that? That might be a new job, right? I think that's something that maybe we might need to think about. If we're constantly away, we're never actually with our families, and it's all because of the job. Well, okay, yeah, maybe it is time to think about a new occupation. But really what I'm thinking about is sometimes we just have to get creative, right? Okay, so I can't be there normally at dinner time like I would like to be. Is there any other time that I can kind of beef up, right? I can't spend the time here in the evening. Maybe I can spend a little more time in the morning, something like that. I was listening to a podcast a while ago, well over a year ago, and it was talking about a guy who was a dad, and he got a job driving a trash truck, and his route started some really early time. I think it started at like 4 a.m. So if his job starts at 4, he's got to be there before that. So we'll say he got there at 2. Well, his route took him into the afternoon, so he missed wake up time with the kids. He missed, getting them ready to go to school, all those kinds of things, right? He missed a lot of just family time. And so he said that when he's done with this shift, right, you will say about noon, 1 o'clock, that'd be like prime time nap time. And in fact, I know that's what I would probably be thinking about it at that time if I had been up for that long. But he said instead of taking that nap, what he's going to do is he's going to stay up and he's going to go pick up his kids from school. That way he gets to interact with them. He gets to ask them, hey, how was your day? They get to talk. And then maybe he'll catch a nap later on in the day. And so it's stuff like that, right? It's really just thinking through, okay, how do I make sure I'm spending time around my family? Because we've got to make sure that we are making time for our families to see and experience our faithfulness.
Yeah, it's so key that that's not only something we're trying to do, but it's something that we desire to do, I think, too. And what you're saying, I mean, of course, we do the things we want to do, right? And so, like, if we want to be dependable, reliable as a spouse, as a parent, as a child, we're going to make that a priority in our life so that we can be able to be dependable and reliable. Because I think at the core of our discussion on faithfulness, we've mentioned often how these terms are interconnected, this with the ideas of dependability and trustworthiness, and we're kind of roping those things in because they're roped into this concept. And so we should be willing to then do what is necessary for those we have committed to. In the family relationship, we have some unique things, right? And we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but we made a commitment to our spouse. That requires us to be dependable to hold up our end of the commitment. When we decided to have children, or maybe we didn't decide to have children, but we had children, we are now responsible for, and that responsibility requires dependability. They are depending on us. We are dependent. They are called our dependents on our tax forms, right? They depend on us in that sense. And so there's a lot that comes into that. And I think Paul, when he's explaining how there are certain situations where the church shouldn't help widows, I think there's an application here that comes in 1 Timothy chapter 5. He's writing to Timothy, he's given some instructions, and he's explaining, we need to be able to help widows. We want to help them, but maybe there are some situations where the church shouldn't be burdened, like if they have children who can take care of them. That's like the first thing that comes in. So do they have dependable, reliable, faithful children? Are they going to step up and do what it's their responsibility to do? And in that context, he makes this statement. He says, if a man doesn't provide for his own, he's worse than an unbeliever. And so their faithfulness is called into question, because how can we say we believe in God if we're not dependable to the people who are relying on us to show that dependability? And so being there for our family, I think, means caring and providing for them, being faithful to the responsibility of the relationship, really, is kind of what it comes to, I think. So kind of to what you were saying, Cody, and to that point, is our faithfulness can shine through when we're found to be the family member that everyone knows they can count on. And when we might have to make sacrifices to make that be the case. But I think also some of our thoughts from last week, we were talking about faithfulness to our brethren, can fit in here as well. Because when we think about what it means to be reliable, it's not just the physical stuff, but it's the mental, emotional, and spiritual stuff as well, right? Rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. Our spouse should know that they're able to come to us with a bad day or a good day, and that we're going to be right beside them. Like we're dependable in that way. Our kids should know that we want to hear what they have to say. Our parents should be able to feel that same way in that relation as we get older and our parents get older, and they know that they can depend on us in that way. Because our love for our family should be seen because of our faithfulness to Jesus.
Yeah, and when we think about the most important things in a family unit, I do think love probably is at the top of the list. And it's interesting just how linked all these things are, right? Because like you're saying, we're not going to be able to be loving, to demonstrate our love without being faithful to our family, without seeing that faithfulness within the family. I think probably the most notable example of faithfulness in a family is fidelity, right? Basically not cheating on your spouse, right? Keeping things pure sexually within the marriage. I think about Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 4. It says marriage is to be honored by all, and the marriage bed kept undefiled, because God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterers. So this is something that God really cares about, right? He cares about all aspects of our faithfulness, but specifically this one he very much cares about. And I'm sure we've all seen the fallout of infidelity, right? If you've seen the damage that will bring to a marriage, right? Husband and wife don't trust each other anymore, and all the bad things that come from that. Even the kids, if they're old enough to kind of know what's going on, they can be affected. I know people who they were really, really young when some of those things happened with their parents, and they're still carrying that burden with them 20, 30, 40 years later. It's hard for them to trust not even just their parents, but anybody, right? So there's just it. If we don't get this right, there's just a lot of problems. But even though I think most people do recognize the problems that could be there, for some reason, sexual purity within the marriage is not something that's nearly as valued as it was maybe in some previous generations. I couldn't find any conclusive statistics. The range was kind of wide, but seeing that, but with divorces, that between 17 and 59% of divorces are because of infidelity, right? So when people dissolve their marriages, often what they're mentioning is, hey, look, somebody cheated here, somebody was not faithful in the marriage. So those are all the bad things, but I think the reverse is true too, right? Like if we get it wrong, a lot of really bad things can happen, but if we get it right, a lot of really, really good things can happen. Since sexual faithfulness is among the most important, I think as our spouses, as they learn to trust us sexually, right? As they learn to trust that we're going to be faithful to them in that way, they learn to trust us in other ways too, right? Because we've got the most important thing down, or one of the most important things down, then the other ones kind of come too. And so there's a lot of good that can come when we are faithful in that way to our spouses. But of course, there's faithfulness in a marriage that isn't sexual. It's just like a general thing. Because again, our spouses, they can depend on us. That's what faithfulness looks like. And so our spouses should be able to trust our faithfulness financially, emotionally, in any of those kinds of ways, right? So our spouses should be able to trust that we are going to manage the money the way that we said that we were going to, that we're going to deal with our own and their emotions in the way that we said that we were going to. They should be able to trust us in those things. It reminds me of a verse in Proverbs 31, the chapter about this wonderful noble woman. Verse 11 says, the heart of her husband trusts in her, and he will not lack anything good. And so there's just something good that comes when we can trust our spouses, right? So for the man here, he trusts her husband, and he will he trusts his wife, and he won't lack anything good, right? There's a peace that comes when hey, I can trust in my spouse. Imagine the good this man can do because he knows his wife's got it, right? Whatever it is, he knows that she's going to be able to take care of it. There's a trust that's built there. And I'm sure the same will be true for a woman, right? If she can trust her husband, she feels that same peace as well. And so again, there's just a lot of peace that we can provide for our spouse if we are faithful. And I'm sure that that peace trickles down to the rest of the family too.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's so true that when there's faithfulness and trustworthiness and dependability, rely, all these things these different terms we've been using, when that exists in a relationship, with a spouse, with children to the parents, parents to the children, when we know that we can depend on people, it creates peace. So when we know we can depend on our parents, we find comfort and peace. When we from a young age learn that we can't depend on our parents, it's going to create all kinds of problems, anxiety, and I think we see that in a lot of different situations. Maybe you're experiencing that. Maybe you grew up in a situation where you couldn't depend on your parents for whatever the thing was, and you're still, like Cody said, some of these things will have lifelong repercussions, and this trust thing is so valuable, so important. I was thinking about what Paul says in Ephesians in two relationships here. He says, first, he says, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother. So that's being dependable. Like, your parents should be able to rely on you to be able to honor them as parents, however that looks in your life. Obey them in the Lord. This is right. This is good for you. Like the next verse says, that this is the first commandment with the promise that you will live long and prosper. Like, this is good for you to be reliable and dependable and treat your parents this way. And then, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but train them up, bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Here, be dependable, be present. We've already talked about that. But then you have a responsibility, train them up, help them to know Jesus. They are depending on you to know him at their youngest stage. And I think that's so important. If we fail in that, we're missing everything, right? Like, we talked about the faithfulness in our spousal relationship, but if we have children and we're not training them to know the Lord, that's what they're depending on us most for. I think Paul's really clear about that. We could go on. There's some proverbs that come to mind. The wisdom of God here: listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Dependability: don't forget who they are and what they've done for you, and whatever that may mean to you. Maybe it's not as much as you feel like some other people have in their relationship, but the wisdom is, remember that relationship. He goes on in verse 24 and 25, the father of the righteous will greatly rejoice, and he who sires a wise son will be glad in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her rejoice who gave birth to you. Joy and peace come when we can rely on the relationship and the people in those relationships. So as children, are we dependable? As parents, are we dependable? All those things tie together, because if we're claiming to be faithful to Jesus and we don't live as a dependable and trustworthy person, we're missing a part of what it means to be like Jesus.
Yeah, and there is that connection between how people perceive our dependability, our trustworthiness, and how they see our Father, which is just so important, right? It's so important because people should be able to see, hey, if I see that this Christian is faithful, well, that's how God is as well. And, really, when we're thinking about the home, just kind of to close all this out, right? The reason why faithfulness is so important within the home is it's because it builds trust. And trust is vital in any home, right? Everybody's got to have trust for the other group. Husband, wife, parent, child, parent. If that trust breaks down, then chaos is not far away. But when our spouses see our faithfulness, when they see that, okay, his yes is his yes and his no is his no, they learn to trust us. Same with children. Children, when they see our faithfulness, when they see, okay, they've done this thing X amount of times, right now they trust us. And I don't even know that it's a conscious thing. I think sometimes maybe it is, but sometimes that's just how it is, right? As if you see somebody do something over and over and over again, you see them be dedicated to something, you just kind of know that that's what they're going to do. And I think it begins with these people trusting us with things that they've seen us do before, but eventually it leads to them trusting us to do things that they haven't seen, right? Because they just know who we are. They know that we're faithful people. And this is so important because that's exactly how our trust in God is built. We have seen and read about him doing amazing things. And so we learn to trust him with all of those things. But then eventually we learn to trust and have faith in him to do the things that we don't see him do every day. right? And so it's just it just builds, and it's through faithfulness, right? It's because God is so faithful. Now we can build our faith in Him. And for many, the beginning of faith is in the home. The beginning of their trust in God is in the home. So we, as Christian parents, we have to be displaying that. We have to be giving that example to our kids. And this is also where a lot of people learn to trust other Christians too, right? So a child, the first Christians that they may be around may be their parents or spouses. At the very least, the Christian that they may interact with the most is their spouse, right? And so if we are demonstrating this faithfulness within our families, the other people in our families learn, oh man, yeah, this is what good Christian faithful people look like, right? And they begin to trust those people too. So I think we as Christians, we should be showing our families what good, godly, and dependable people look like.
Yeah, absolutely. And it starts with our own faithfulness to Jesus. We need to be reliable to our commitment to Him. And so, as we're walking by the Spirit and led to be transformed into His likeness, we should want to be faithful in all things and to all people. We should want to be known as reliable and dependable in our relationships, no matter the sacrifice to ourselves, because Jesus made a great sacrifice for us. And we depended on Him, and He came through. He was faithful. We rely on God, and God is faithful. And He has proven Himself faithful over and over again. So, as we kind of conclude our reflection on this particular episode and on faithfulness as a whole, would your spouse or other family member consider you to be faithful in that relationship? Do your family members see your faithfulness to God and to others and experience it as we're thinking about those relationships and we think about our life and how it fits together? Is God's faithfulness changing you? And what can we do this next week to grow in our faithfulness to our family members?
Thank you for listening to the Honest Reflection Podcast. If you liked this episode, give it a like, a share, or even a comment to let us know how we're doing. We hope we've helped you think, reflect, and be honest about your relationship with God. And we can't wait to see you again next week.